Very good welcome to all our dear listeners. Welcome to yet another edition ACFIM Talks. Your host, as usual, Felix Kafuma. And today we are discussing Uganda's reparations in the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. And I'll be joined by two distinguished guests that I'll be introducing in a short while. But before we start, allow me to invite everybody to come and be part of this discussion by subscribing to our social media platforms. We are live on Facebook, ACFIM, and also on YouTube, ACFIM Uganda, including our Twitter handle at ACFIMUG. You can get in there, subscribe, and also be part of the conversation and send in your requests, your questions, and your clarifications on the discussion we are having for today. Let me provide the context, then I'll introduce the cast that I have with me today. We are all aware that last week, the International Court of Justice awarded DRC $325 million. That's about 1.1 trillion Uganda shillings for our Ugandan comrades. To be paid by Uganda in reparations related to the brutal conflict between the two nations. And you remember very well that we were active in Congo between 1998 to 2003 in what has come to be called the Second Congo War. The reparation awarded to DRC does point to the fact that Uganda is culpable for damages to persons and to property. It finds Uganda also culpable in breach of its international obligations. Of course, when you look at the asking price for the DRC initially, it was much higher. And I think the negotiations that have been ensuing since then have then led us to be slapped a fine of worth 325 million US dollars. But this compensation is broken down into three categories. The first category, where we are paying $225 million, is damage to persons, which includes loss of life, rape, recruitment of child soldiers, and displacement of civilians. Then we are supposed to pay $40 million US dollars to damage to property. And then we are supposed to pay $60 million US dollars for damage to natural resources, including the looting and the plundering of gold, diamonds, and timber. We've been given a leeway to pay the reparations in 5 annual installments of 65 million US dollars, which is about 228 billion. And we are starting this year in September. Now, this and much more is what we are going to discuss today. And with me, allow me to introduce our first panelist, who is Dismas Nkunda. Many of you have seen him, read his articles, seen him a number of times commenting on issues around atrocities. He is a civil society leader, the founder and the current executive director of Atrocities Watch Africa. He has firm journalistic background, and he has covered extensively conflicts in East Africa, Great Lakes region, and is also a human rights activist. Dismas, you're most welcome to this show. Okay, now I can hear you.
Okay, you can hear me?
I can hear you now.
Yeah, right. Good morning, and thank you for the kind introductions, and it's good to be here.
Great. Our other panelist needs no much introduction, is no stranger in such spaces, and on the screen is Edgar Tabaro, who is an expert on the Great Lakes issues. He's an established attorney and a partner at Karuhanga Tabaro Associates, KTA. He has specialized in intellectual property, corporate law, construction law, and insolvency, including energy, oil, and gas. He's also a former law don at Uganda Christian University, UCU. Council, you are most welcome. I seem to have lost him in the process, and I think he's there, he's joining in. You're most welcome, Council. I think he has a connection problem, but I can see him on the screen. It's good to have you. Okay, as we get Edgar, I think either he's muted or not. I can't seem to hear what he's saying, but I can see him on the screen. Allow us to dive deep into this discussion. And I'll start with you, Dismas. We, first of all, it's quite strange because there were more, I think there were more than 9 countries in DRC around that time. And the bigger question is why, of all the 9, I can actually mention some of them. We had Rwanda there, our neighbor. We also had, I think Zimbabwe was there as well. We had Angola there. The bigger question is we had Namibia, we had Chad, we had Libya and Sudan. But why Uganda? Yet there were more than 1 country in DRC.
Felix, it's very simple. Those other countries that you are mentioning, the 9 countries, they were not invading forces. They came in as a rescue package requested by the then government in DR Congo. So the countries that were of concern were mainly Uganda, Rwanda, and Burundi. Those ones were the ones which were seen as invading forces. And indeed, they were uninvited guests into DR Congo. Now, what happened is that the rest of the 2 other countries, that is Rwanda and Burundi, negotiated their way out of this impasse. At much later point, maybe I'll be able to share with you what exactly happened. But they managed to get out of the impasse because some of them, for example, Rwanda, it's not a signatory to the jurisdiction of the International Court of Justice. So therefore, it couldn't be taken to International Court of Justice. But even then, because the initial fact was that Congo had even slapped the same on Rwanda, Rwanda managed to negotiate itself out of that conundrum. What happened with Uganda is that Uganda became insolent. We didn't understand the severity of the matter, that actually this one was going to become a big problem. And we continue to think that we would be able to prevail over the case at the International Court of Justice, which unfortunately didn't happen. So then it means that Uganda, out of the 9 countries that you speak about, Felix, it's the only country that has ultimately to pay. The fortunate thing is that it's not the 11 billion that DR Congo had initially wanted as reparations. Now that they have come to at least 325 million, it's less a figure than what had been initially asked for. So to that extent, I think Uganda is a country to blame, and we unfortunately have nothing to do but rather to pay up that matter, because we can't even appeal. There is no appeal under the International Court of Justice. Its decision is final. So there is nothing else we can do other than if there is a political persuasion between Kinshasa and Kampala, then short of that is to pay the money and we move forward.
Interesting, and I hope I can get Edgar here on set. But my understanding is that at some point, Kinshasa and Kampala capital here, during Kabira's reign, there was a point when we were in bed together. What happened? Because for a fact, Parliament never approved our involvement in DRC. But I've come across information in the corridors, and you may help me verify that it was a gentleman's agreement between Kabila and Museveni for Uganda to be in Congo. Help me, because give us the background genesis of this, where we find ourselves now, slapped with them.
Okay, what happened was that initially, you remember, Kabila essentially was a person that came from a help that was extended by Uganda and Rwanda in terms of the overthrow of President Mobutu Sese Seko. So what happened is that Kabila was backed by Uganda, but the moment Kabila got into power in Kinshasa, he turned against his, because he felt that the control that he was getting, that was coming from both Uganda and Rwanda, was simply too much for him, and that the control and the amount of exploitation that was happening, being done by these forces which had helped him to come to power, was too much for him. I don't know whether you remember that at one point the chief of defense forces of DR Congo was a Rwandese general. So to that extent, he felt that he was in captivity himself as a president. Yes, Edgar.
I seem to be losing Edgar. He comes on and then gets off. Probably is having a
So,
connection.
okay. So yes. So essentially, what happened later is that Uganda, that Kabila felt that these countries had betrayed him, and the fallout was not very good because Uganda ended up supporting other groups. For example, you remember after the Kisangani clashes that happened between Uganda and Rwanda over similar misunderstandings of how they are going to be able to settle the political process in Congo, we ended up supporting MDC, which was headed by Pierre Bemba. And much later, we changed also and supported Professor Wamba Diawamba. So there is a story that evolved out of our involvement in Congo, and it doesn't help matters that our soldiers also didn't behave when they started looting, marrying more women than they needed, and ending up us having committed these crimes that are determined by an international arbitration court.
Wow. I hope I can get Edgar to come in on this one. He joined us briefly and then again dropped off. But as I wait for Edgar, let me proceed with you, Dismas. So, can we trace this? Because part of the money we're supposed to pay for is the looting that happened, where we are found culpable for looting timber, gold, and I think it was mainly timber, gold, and diamonds.
Yes.
Can we trace, because they're slapping this on the entire country, but we know there were individuals. Is there a way of tracing this wealth and holding individual
Um,
persons liable?
yes, Felix. You know what happened is that actually it's sad that Edgar is not being audible on this, but he's spoken about this widely. I've been on 3 different forums with him and has spoken very good about this. I would have loved him to speak about it. But what happened is that Uganda government set up a commission of inquiry into the activities of the UPDF and the involvement in DR Congo. It was headed by Justice Porter, who was a British judge in Uganda. I think maybe one of the last judges in Uganda. And it did identify individuals who are culpable in the looting of Democratic Republic of Congo. Just to refresh your mind, Felix, it's not the first time that Uganda has been culpable in looting in Democratic Republic of Congo.
Yes. Yes.
It did happen during, I mean, you remember the Congo scandal, the Congo gold scandal under Idi Amin, between Idi Amin and
The
Obote.
gold scandal.
So it's gold scandal. So it's not the first time. So, but this Porter Commission did identify individuals who actually were culpable in the acts, and the people were known. If you are around that time, you are privy to what was going on at Entebbe Airport, you'd have been able to know who exactly is importing, who is bringing timber. At one point, Uganda became one of the leading diamond exporters in the world, and we don't have even a single diamond mine, but we are leading exporters. So the individuals who are involved are known, but the International Criminal Court of Justice does not try individuals, it tries states. So to that extent, whether those individuals are government employees, whether they are individual business individuals who were involved in the plunder of Congo, ultimately the slap is put on the Uganda government as a government entity which is party to the conventions and the rules of engagement of the International Criminal Court of Justice. So what is going to happen is that all of us, even when you didn't even pick a single timber, a single piece of gold or a single piece of diamond, we are all going to pay. As taxpayers, that money is going to come from a government purse, and we will be able to contribute to it. That is the folly of democracy, I think.
Yeah, indeed, the folly of democracy. I think for now, I have Edgar. Finally, I can have you. You kept checking on us and dropping off. Sorry about that. But you found us when we had started, and but let me first allow you to give us your fair overview of the fine that has been slapped on Uganda for our activities in Congo so many years back. First of all, what's your take? And then quickly, because also this was talked about it because there was a question why Uganda and yet there were other land forces, which just help to understand. But quickly, what's your take on this?
Of it, I think in that case you really restricted me. after my I don't know how fair I'll come off, but my elder Dismas already indicated that it's not the first time Uganda is involved in Congo. So the question that we ask time and again, what is it that takes us into the Congo? Are there any legitimate
We also not the only forces in Congo.
Yes, there were 9 forces in Congo. Then why was Uganda fingered? Or maybe better still, what is it that keeps taking us back to the Congo? Now, on the outset, I would like to state it that Uganda has a legitimate interest to pursue in Congo. For a long time, there have been destabilizing forces in the eastern part of the DRC. At least for the most part of the last 2.5 decades, the ADF, or rather 3.5 decades, ADF, NALU, and I don't remember. There was even other forces in Ituri. I think Uganda, I think the West Nile Bank Front also did operate from Ituri. Tabani Amini had forces himself. Tabani Amini is now the Director General of External Security Organization. He too had forces operating in that area. So as far as legitimacy is concerned, Uganda has, at all material time, has had a legitimate interest to pursue the Congo. But what we are handling now is the legality of our intervention. When Uganda got involved in the DRC in 1996 and later on in 1998, that has resulted in this matter that was decided in the ICJ, we were really following an agenda that had been set by a neighboring country. And in so doing, Uganda did not follow the due legal process set by the UN Charter and the OAU, the then OAU, now later AU Charter, in carrying out combat operations in that part of the world. So, as far as the law is concerned, Uganda was certainly did not follow the letter and spirit of Article 51 of the UN Convention on non-interference, and where you interfere in another country, it must be upon certain legal, grounded in legal principles. One, as on this occasion, by invitation by the host country, or hot pursuit. Now, there was every reason for Uganda to pursue the legal argument that ADF was operating in that area, and they went there in pursuit of those forces. Now, that was not done. And instead, the politics of the day did inform the decisions that we made. And it's at that point that I would like to submit that in as far as the politics took center stage and the legal issues went to the back, then Uganda should have engaged the Democratic Republic of Congo diplomatically. At the time of filing of this case, June 1999, Uganda was right in the middle of a peace process, a negotiation process that has been tagged the Lusaka peace process under the chairmanship of the late Frederick Chiruba. Now, the agreement that resulted from the Lusaka peace process, where able Ugandans, Amama Mbabazi, who was then Minister of State for Political Affairs, was our representative there, and other officials I needed to mention. We had a formidable team there, and in July 1999, an agreement was signed that agreed to cessation of all hostilities and a framework for cooperation and an interim or government of national unity, where the likes of Pierre Bemba, Azarias Ruberwa were included. Azarias Ruberwa, Yerodiria Ndombasi, who represented the old Mobutists. I forget the fourth vice president. They had 4 vice presidents. Now, the interim question that lingers in my mind, they were in the middle of negotiating a peace process. The final agreement was penned on July the 10th, 1999. 3 weeks before, this matter was filed in the ICJ. So what is it that went wrong? What is it that went wrong? And I've always emphasized to my elder, and he does agree with me, that many things, many events in the world turn on information that is not available to the public. So what is that information? What is that information that is not available to us that led to what we have before us and we're discussing? I think that's where our discussion should be going. I so submit.
Yeah, indeed. It's important to understand what exactly went wrong in between, because we wouldn't be where we are right now. But still with you, Edgar, because I lost a bit in understanding in maximize. What is the implication of this ruling, especially to Uganda's international image, but also the way it relates with the members in the Great Lakes region, but also in the broader scheme of things of international geopolitics? What is the meaning of this ruling?
A week, like they say, is a very long time in politics. And the world of diplomacy is shrouded in deep seas of secret, corridors of intricacies that many of us ordinary people don't come across, and a lot of intrigue that happens in those corridors of power. So I remember I and Dismas were chatting over these matters. For barely 48 hours after the court ruling was made, where the damages were equated to 325 million US dollars, President Museveni was meeting Felix Tshisekedi in the city of Oyo, just across Brazzaville. And the question is that what is it that they were discussing that the rest of us do not know? Then 24 or 36 hours later, he flew to Dakar to meet the chairman of the African Union, the President Macky Sall. So those are the questions we should be asking ourselves. And I know as well.
Edgar, you're forgetting one part, which is that there was also a negotiation that happened in which the DR Congo wanted only a claim of 200 million, and it was decided that 200 million was too much, and let the case continue in court, and it will be sorted by court, because Uganda had a very good case to present before the ICJ. The results, 325 million.
True. In 2005, actually, when the first ruling was made that Uganda was liable for armed activities that interfered with the sovereignty of the DRC. Now, between 2005 and today, they gave us all the time to negotiate, to enter a negotiated settlement outside of the court, and for us to go and register. To register what they call a consent judgment before the courts. Now that did not happen. There were back and forth discussions. But what we learned over the time, what is coming out, is that President Kabila at the time felt slighted by Ugandans in the manner in which the negotiations were conducted, and I think there was name calling at one point or another, where he felt belittled. There also
calling him a boy.
Yeah. Well, I'm told he was called a boy by certain officials from this side, and also
diplomatic.
Pardon?
The language was non-diplomatic in the negotiation.
I doubt that language.
It depends.
So quite frankly,
okay, proceed.
So quite frankly, there are many things that happen behind the scenes that determine diplomacy, on the outlook of diplomacy. And that's why I'm bringing the aspect of President Museveni meeting Felix Tshisekedi barely 36 or 48 hours after the court ruling is made. Then he travels to meet the chairman of the AU. Because you did ask me, what does this portend for Uganda's image, for Uganda's diplomacy in the region? Now, no doubt we'll have to up our diplomatic game, we'll have to up our diplomatic outreach. And President Museveni, being the person he is, I think he's moving ahead of some of his contemporaries and has made those outreaches behind the scenes and what we get to see in the media.
Wow. Okay. We shall be going for a break in about 5 minutes. But before we go for a break, this month, interestingly, we are back in Congo. And we are hoping this time. The beauty is that this time we have been invited to Congo. I think we seem to be ticking the boxes of the legalities that come with our presence in Congo. But as a Ugandan, it's what should we expect? Because does that mean that we've learned from our past mistakes, that what happened will not happen again? Should we read deep into our involvement in Congo again in relation to the ruling at ICJ?
Felix, Edgar, first of all, good to see you, my brother. It's a very tricky situation, because in the beginning, 1998, we were uninvited. We were invited by a rebel group to go and support them in terms of their fight against President Mobutu Sese Seko. This time, we are being invited to go to Congo because we are going to fight a rebel force that is against the Uganda's interests, like how Edgar explained, which is hot pursuit. Your hot pursuit is that you are using international norms to be able to carry out an activity that gives security to your nation, to your boundaries, to your country. Now, does it change if we go into Congo now? It changes because it can. Okay, let me put it on two aspects. One is that the change may happen because the commanders now know the ramifications of what they can be held to account for, or the things that can happen to them should they go to the same things of damage of person, damage of property, and damage and looting that happened in the previous years. As to whether that is going to be controlled, it's very difficult. Remember, Congo has 133 rebel groups. 133. Some of them are pro-government. Some of them are against government. ADF is one out of the 133. So anything can happen, and it can be attributed to the UPDF. So the strictness with which the mandate of UPDF is happening in Congo now has to remain very, very watertight. The beauty is that Uganda is restricted, UPDF is restricted to a certain triangle. It can't move out of that triangle. UPDF can't be able to attack any of the other 132 rebel groups. It can only attack ADF. Even if another rebel group came into its site, its mandate is that you can't attack any other rebel group. That was the understanding between Uganda and DR Congo. As to whether that is going to make the UPDF look immune, it's a question of time. The longer an army stays in a particular place, the more they become acclimatized, the more they start knowing the weaknesses, and in particular for Congo, given its riches, the wood, the timber, the diamonds, the women, it is very, very possible that it can be able to attract some people becoming funny. Is that funny?
Yeah, Congo is very attractive.
This much has covered war as a news reporter, so he knows what happens behind the bazookas and the attack helicopters we see.
Okay, let's go for a break, but when we come back, we shall pick it up from there. Because I'll need to pick Edgar's perspectives on how different it is now than it was, because we were there in around 64. Then the gold scandal came up. We are back.
I'll give you the background to that gold scandal. It is misrepresented by chroniclers.
Okay. We shall benefit from that background shortly after the break.